Good. So, 3, 2, 1, let's go. Chris, welcome, buddy. Hello.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me. JS Craft. It's my pleasure.
Yes. Thank you. Uh, Chris, as I told you in the introduction, for me is like meeting you is like meeting my favorite football player. You had a very big influence over my career. Not just once, I thought about doing a CSS tricks of my own because I
Mm,
was loving the website so much that in my mind was I should do something like this. Is really fun as at least as a tribute to what Chris is doing. So yeah, thank you for
sure, you should. I've been a long time. I think my message has been clear. I think more people should write and share what they know with the world because it's unique that we can do that in our industry. And I don't know. I'd still encourage you to write more, but you kind of are doing it. You have this podcast, and that's a way of doing it as well.
exactly. That was I think you have to find what works for you. Actually, we will speak a bit later also about writing in this new, more or less strange era of AI, because this comes with some caveats. Chris, you don't need too much introduction, in my opinion. You are the founder of CSS-Tricks. You sold it, I think, 2 or 3 years ago to DigitalOcean, if I
That's right. Yep.
remember correctly. Now you are running CodePen, which almost all JavaScript developers know, and you are also running the Shop Talk podcast.
Yes, that's right. That's the big three career things that I do for sure. Or kind of two now. I don't have anything to do with CSS Tricks anymore, but the team that is operating it right now is doing a great idea, and that makes me very happy.
Wonderful, wonderful. I want to start with something a bit egoistic. Is a question for myself. Your podcast is now close to episode 700, which is
Mhm.
a lot. Do you have any tips? Have you thought why were you able to do it for such a long time?
That's a good question, and I ask myself that sometime. But Dave and I have talked about it
Mhm.
a number of times. In that the key to the longevity in this case, in this one isolated case of just Shop Talk Show, Dave Rupert and I running this show, we have made lots of decisions over those many years, more than 10 years now, to, to keep it easy on ourselves. So one of the first things that we did is have a somebody who edits the show for
Mhm.
us. As you know, that can be quite time consuming, and isn't like particularly one of my skills. Like I could learn it, and I have done it before, but I don't know that I want to make that part of my day to day. I want to keep my time for my hobbies and my career and things that I'm better at. I'm not trying to make a career out of editing audio files necessarily, but there are those people who are trying to make a career out of it. And I found that the price of outsourcing that pretty okay. Right now, we have a fellow named Chris Enns do it
Mhm.
at Lemon Productions, and he does a great job with it and has enough clients and stuff that he has a successful business around doing this job. And what he charges for it is a fair price. And so that alone, that one choice, brings down the amount of work it takes to record this show. And we used to do more ambitious shows. We used to have more guests than we do. We used to, I don't know, just do, it's not like the show has no effort at all into it, but we have dialed that back a lot. And a perfectly capable show is just me and Dave talking to each other. We have lots of ways to talk to each other. So planning, and we have a shared calendar. So we both know when shows are coming up. We happen to use a piece of software called
Mhm.
Riverside.fm, which is we just pop into a link and hit the record button. So no longer do we have to kind of coordinate getting people's files and sharing a Dropbox and making sure we have backups and stuff like that. So the ease of
Mhm.
scheduling, the ease of not having to deal with editing and the software choices and stuff means that for the most part, we just hop on a show. I talk to my friend Dave, we hit stop, and we have other people do the rest of the work involved, which means that it's not a big lift. It's not something I have to constantly think about, like, oh, life is getting hard, something's got to drop off here. Should it be Shop Talk Show? The answer is like, no, Shop Talk Show doesn't cost me that much. And we have been lucky enough to have, we are far from the peak of podcast sponsorship making any money. But we still do get enough sponsorship, just enough, just barely, that it pretty much breaks even cost wise. So it also isn't costing us financially to run the show. It pretty much breaks even. So that also is a factor in how we can keep going. That if this was like costing us money and time and, all we were getting out of it is a little bit of fun, maybe it would have dropped off. But, thanks to our sponsors well enough that we're able to keep going. So no end in sight, really. One way that we think about it is just, it's a built-in excuse to talk to a friend every week.
So basically, if I understood correctly, do it as frictionless as possible and keep as much as the fun part in it and remove all the rest.
Right. Very lucky to be able to do that.
Speaking of fun, for some reason, you always seem to me the type of guy who is having fun. I don't know if you watch Top Gear. It's was very famous here in Europe, but as Jeremy Clarkson, the guy who made that TV show, you also seem to have a lot of fun in doing what you do. On the other side, you are also financial successful with the exit from CSS-Tricks, what you do with CodePen, and the fact that you have built these two businesses and you are doing well. My question is, how important is having fun for you? And when do you trade having fun versus making money? How do you balance these two?
Yeah. Well, that's a well-asked question, I think, because it really is. It's a trade-off sometimes. Sometimes it's just a benefit. I think some people, like you, appreciate that. Like that, if I was just very serious all the time, maybe less people would have paid attention to me throughout the years that I was doing that. And some people just like the fun part or the casual way that I write or talk or whatever else it is. And thus I've kind of, grown some audience because of it, perhaps. So that's good. That's having it both ways. That's, I get to have fun and people like it and I can grow in that way. So there's no real trade-off there. But there are trade-offs, I think. I think if I did things that were less fun more often, there's a chance that I could be more successful than I am. And then I just prefer the level that I'm at because my stress is low and I have fun doing it. Okay. But I think if there's times in whatever business I was trying to build where instead of joking around so much, I just, buckled down and did more marketing or we're like much more serious and looking at our finances and finding opportunities and analytics and things that I find less fun. I think if I took that stuff more seriously, perhaps I would be more successful than I am. Part of me is that, but I'm so lucky to be able to have fun while doing this, and I'm not burnt out on it. I'm sure you've seen the discourse around people that do this for long enough that they get burnt out, and some of them just is up to an extreme as needing to take very long breaks or leave the industry entirely.
Yeah,
right. And I am sympathetic to that. And the only reason that I haven't had to do that is because I get to have fun while I do it. I don't really have a boss. That's nice. That can be a big source of burnout.
I think we can see at some point having fun as a sort of an investment, beside the fact that it's actually fun to have fun. But if you invest in having fun, you can do this for longer. That's also increasing your professional lifespan. So in the end, ending up better financially.
Sure. Do you want, how much does, if we're talking about just money, like how much is enough then? If that's like, isn't it equally or more important? You know, haven't stories taught us that, especially at this time of year in the holidays, look at the Scrooge story, where he has to go back and look at his life and he has to evaluate that. And he was such a jerk for most of his life. What's that? Forget money. Isn't having a life that you enjoy better?
I will change a bit the direction of the conversation. And you being in this industry for such a long time, you have seen a lot of trends come and go. Were you able to spot any pattern by which you distinguish between signal versus noise? Have you been able to, I don't know, to make a guess, this thing will stick or not?
I wouldn't say I'm particularly good at it.
Hmm.
There's some value to latching on to the trends. That if that if people are interested in a particular topic for a while, it can be okay to write about it and to podcast about it and to get into that. For example, on the web now, this is thanks, people tend to follow what Apple does. Apple has this
Exactly.
liquid glass aesthetic that has come out. I think it's okay to analyze that and think about it and write articles about it and try to replicate it in certain ways. That's just a trend. Do I think it's going to last for a very, very long time forever? No, of course it won't. But it's okay to do that. But at the same time, you got to be kind of balancing. Like if that's all you care about, what part of liquid glass is actually meaty and interesting? Like what is it doing with the philosophy of design that's actually helpful in there, and kind of understand that and know what's going on. But yeah, I'm a little bit bad at knowing what's gonna stick long term and what's not going to. Fortunately, I've had some good bets. Like early on, I was like, jQuery was popular at one time, and I was like, I'm gonna get into that library. That one seems like it's big and has legs, and maybe it's not forever, but I feel pretty good about that. Where there was a time where there was competing JavaScript frameworks, identifying which ones kind of have the most interest and legs behind them. I feel like I chose correctly there. And at a wider scale, what about just the web itself? There was probably people that were like, say the iPhone comes out and Android comes out and people are building apps natively. There was certainly a time where like, man, the web is doomed.
Good point.
When Steve Jobs was alive, there was no. It was very much like you should build apps for this, and that attitude really still sticks around. Like there's certain developers perhaps that jumped ship from the web that said the web is doomed. I'd rather build apps in a different way. And I think they were kind of wrong about that. The web has amazing staying power, and just choosing the web as a long-term platform, that's no trend. That's real.
Correct. One thing that I spotted while you answered, coming back to the liquid glass thing, is
Mm.
I think a good question to ask is is this thing adds real value? Because if it will add real value, it will stick.
Right. Some things tend to not change. This is related to business as well. What human beings need out of digital technology doesn't change that much. It's unlikely that you're going to start a business that invents a new human need.
Hmm.
That's probably not going to happen. What people need is like a way to talk to their friends and family. They need to know where they're going. They need to remember things. They want to feel nostalgic. They want to learn things. These are human needs that existed before the internet and will continue to exist. And like a good business taps into a human need that humans already have and makes it easier or faster or more fun or something. Whereas, if your business like edges towards some trend or some need that you've kind of dreamed up that people don't really have, that's not going to work either.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Great point. You mentioned businesses a bit early, and this actually leads me to the next couple of questions. I think by what you did with CSS-Tricks and now with CodePen, it's safe to say that you have built some good businesses. And one question is how I see things, and please correct me if I am wrong, but I think sometimes businesses are a long set of bets, correlated bets. You go to from one bet to another. But one of my questions is how much do you put in such a bet? Because that bet may work right out of the get-go, or sometimes it works if you put a lot of effort in it and break that scale, and sometimes you're just heading to a dead end. From your experience, what's your take on how much should you put into a bet?
Yeah, I mean that is what business is. I think you're right about that, and your appetite for the risk of a bad bet is different from person to person. And some people can do very, very risky bets and it can pay off. And then the story becomes look at this person, they took a huge risk and they won, and good for them, which is a little bit like gambling or playing the lottery. And then you look at the successful people and you want to do what they did, even though you know that most people's lottery ticket ends up in the trash. I don't know. I would say my appetite for risk is probably lower than average, and that I have done some businesses. It's not that I've not taken any bets, but I'm not comfortable with, for example, a bet in which if it doesn't pay off, I lose my home or something. I'm not. That's too risky for me. So when I started, the biggest risks that I were taken, for example, were like when I left full-time employment. That's a gamble because you don't have that paycheck anymore. You're hoping that you can direct your time in such a way that you can turn that into money eventually, and then you get all the upside from that you wouldn't be able to do if you still had the job. I did that once, but I did that at a time when the industry was so much stronger feeling than it is now, that it's like, if that bet didn't pay off, well, I had some savings, so I could make a decision later that says like, nah, I have to go back to work because this bet isn't paying off. And I had no doubt that I could jump right back into a job and be making money again. So the risk wasn't that high because I felt like I could reverse the bet pretty quickly. There would be some downsides, but it didn't feel that risky. I feel less certain of that now. I worry about people that have to make a riskier bet now. Do you think you could have a job in a week if you quit your job now? Could you get another job in a week? It feels maybe.
Correct.
But I feel like I've been in this industry a long time. I have lots of connections. It for a long time that felt very stable and easy. But I've known people that are at my level or higher, smarter than me, that found themselves looking for a job, and it took them a really long time. They felt really worried about that, and why would I think I'd do any better than they would? I don't. So that makes me nervous. It makes me less willing to gamble like that.
But in your experience running CSS-Tricks and CodePen, did you had the situation where the bet didn't? You had to push into something in order to make it work. So let's say you get this idea of, I don't know, making a podcast, and some things work right out of the gate, and that's cool. But sometimes you have to keep pushing for, I don't know, 100, 200 episodes in order to see some traction from there. Have you noticed this? And the question is, do you have any idea when to stop? I mean, if after 200 episodes, okay, then we should stop. Do you have a strategy for this? It's just a random question.
No, but it did have something to do with earlier in our conversation. We talked about fun and things, and that this has already happened in a way that well, with CSS-Tricks, for example, there was years definitely where the site made a little bit of money, but the time I was putting into it was not equal to what I was getting out of it. But I kind of said, I don't care. I get a little bit out of this. I think it's kind of fun to do, and I'm not at risk of losing a house or anything, so I'm just going to keep doing it. That can be great. It works fine for me. But I notice in business that that can be risky. If you start a restaurant, nobody comes to your restaurant for 2 years, it's probably better advice to say you need to do something else. You need to move on. And I think in tech businesses, it's even quicker. You're not getting any customers. You can't seem to get anybody's attention about this. It seems to be better advice to scrap it and try something else sooner.
Oh, okay.
But I don't, that's not me though. That's a very personal decision. And usually what works for me is perseverance. It's just, I know this is a good idea, so I'm just going to keep doing it. And I like it, and I have fun doing it. I'm not going to stop. And I see people that quit what seems to me a little too early, and that I get that that's great business advice. Why would you try one business for 10 years when you could have tried 10 businesses, one per year? I think your chances of hitting are higher if you try those 10 different businesses, but that doesn't fit me well. It doesn't fit my personality. I'm much more into keep going.
I am the same.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And speaking of starting something new, let's say that today you know what you or everything that you know, so your brain is 100, your knowledge is 100% intact, but you don't have any following, any reputation, anything. You don't have CodePen, you don't have the history of CSS-Tricks, nothing.
Right.
What would you start building? Where, or at least where would you start looking?
Yeah, that's tough. I've mentioned in the past that it was kind of writing was a big opportunity for me, and that I spent those years doing it without anybody caring that it was slow growth. So I just wrote my way through it. I was just like, I'm just gonna write and then grow that audience. And then after I did that, everything else that's happened to me has gotten to use that. I've been able to ride on the audience and such that I got from doing that. So when I launched CodePen, people cared and tried it because they already knew me. That's less true now. I think CodePen is bigger than me, and there's probably most CodePen users have no idea who I am or care. And that's nice to see a project kind of get bigger than you. But, you know, when I started speaking at conferences, it was because I wrote. When I started Shop Talk Show, people listened because they already knew who I was. And then I was able to take that audience and point them at this new thing. So it's like, as soon as you have gained an audience in one way, it does tend to last. It doesn't last forever, but that's a way to do it. So how would you start absolutely from scratch? Well, if the audience part is important, you're going to have to find them somewhere. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what the answer is anymore to that. I used to say that writing was perhaps the easiest way to do it, but I'm not sure that's true anymore. And the world has changed, and perhaps it's short form video. Perhaps the way to get an audience these days is you're going to have to do the TikTok thing. And if that's where the audience is, maybe you can find them there, and then you can push that audience around if you can. I don't know if that's the right way to do it or not, but you have to do something that people want from you. You have to grow that audience, and it's going to take a while. It seems even if you had a crazy viral hit, or even if you had 3 of them, I don't think it's enough
Yeah,
to have like a big long-term thing. People have to start associating you with something that happens over a long period of time, not a short period of time.
correct.
And yeah, so that's going to be tough. But in tech, maybe there's different paths. If the only world that you really care about is having other developers really know who you are, then maybe it's not short term. Maybe it still is writing, or maybe it's working on a well-known project. I think of somebody like Evan from Vue.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
he doesn't write. He does conference talks here and there, but
yeah,
he's famous for literally his projects.
yeah.
People see him. He's the Veet guy, and everybody knows that. So he can parlay that audience in different ways. That's a way in. Podcasting might be a way in, video might be a way in, writing might be a way in, I don't know.
Maybe is I remember this talk Steve Jobs gave many, many years ago, and I think was at Stanford. And one of the points he raised there was connect the dots. But I think in order to be able to connect these dots, you have to do stuff and to try stuff, like how it was in your case. Initially, you built a network of blogs because I know this is how CSS-Tricks started, and from
Right.
there CSS-Tricks sticked, and after that, because you needed a way to show the demos on CSS-Tricks, you built CodePen.
Right.
So one thing led to another, but this is not possible if you don't try stuff. You always
Right.
have to keep rolling the dice.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, one thing certainly can lead to another. It's nice to have some goals too. Like what is it that you want? If somebody just says like I just want to be famous, I don't know, what does that mean? I don't.
Correct.
That's a weird goal, and there's probably different ways to do it, and
Correct.
I'm not sure.
In the same context of what to work next, do you have a strategy to decide? A new year is starting, it's right around the corner. And do you have a strategy to decide what should I work on this year in order to get good results? Because I think it was from Naval Ravikant, I heard this. Many people, almost all of us, put 8 hours or something like that in working, and more or less the intelligence is somehow similar, but the outputs are completely different because the big difference is made on what you work on instead of how hard you work on. Do you have any principles, any strategies in deciding what should you focus on next?
Absolutely. If you already have a business and you already have customers, you have lots of data to go on that you should be listening to. If you're not talking to the customers who use your thing, you need to talk to them more, because there's going to be lots of insight with them that you wouldn't have otherwise. And they're the people who have already paid you money and might pay you more money. They're ripe for understanding how you can help them. They already probably like you to some degree. So when you already have a business, that should be your guiding force, And some people don't make decisions based on those customers well enough, or at least are factoring them into their plans. You should at least be observing them and trying to understand, what have people told you that they wish your thing could do? That could at least be a data point for you that's like, yeah, maybe we should consider building that or a version of that, because you might have some internal thoughts of like, I know what would make this product better. And kind of balanced with your intuition of like, what, it's okay that what might be fun, what might be hard, what might be easy, that kind of thing. But yeah, how do you prioritize work is what you're asking. Is like, you should prioritize things that would make the thing that you're building so much better. You just know they would. You know they would because of your intuition and what people are telling you. And that sort of thing. And that's certainly what's guiding me. Like, I know what would make CodePen better. I know it for lots of reasons. I know it because I have a team and we all agree that it would be better. I know it because we do customer support and people in support are telling us it's better. I know because we have beta test users and those beta users are trying the product and know. I know because we do surveys sometimes asking people. I know which features that cost money in our product are the most used features that people pay for. So if those features were even better, perhaps that would help us. I know for lots of reasons what would make our product better, and that's how we prioritize what that work is. That's still a difficult to sort out, but you can do it.
I see. Okay, so always stay in touch with the customer. That's the main takeaway from here.
I think so.
Yes. By the way, right now at CodePen, do you do something? I mean, you mentioned customer support. You mentioned surveys. Do you sometimes get into contact directly with the customers, like hang out with them for 15 minutes in a talk and ask them and stuff like that?
All the time. All the
Oh,
time.
wow. So nice.
All the time.
So nice.
Probably probably one of the top things that we do. We're in a interesting mode at the moment where we have this big long-term project, which is basically CodePen 2.0, that has probably taken us too long. I'd say, certain business decisions probably weren't made correctly, that it's taken us too long to work on this project, that there was certainly lots of mistakes that we'll look back on. And I'll give you one example. One is that we know that a top-selling CodePen Pro feature now is a very, very simple feature. It's just being able to make the things on CodePen that you make, we call them pens, private. You toggle a switch, and then instead of it being public, it's private. That is a true or false, pretty much, in a database. That's not a complicated piece of technology to build. That we didn't, it didn't take a genius to make that sort of thing. There's some implications to that. It doesn't show up on your profile. We try to not make it show up in search. It has to be integrated all throughout the app. It's not completely simple, but it's pretty simple compared to some other very complicated stuff that we need to do to operate that business. Private pens is pretty easy. And we have plenty of good evidence from customers, from paying users, that it's not quite enough. The way that it works is pretty much that the URL to the pen has a long hash in it that's unguessable. It's a long alphanumeric thing, and you could tell a supercomputer to guess, for the rest of our lives, and it would never guess one of these things. That's just how the math of that works out. But it doesn't. If you have the URL for it, you can just immediately see it. You can see it as a logged out user. If that URL leaks outside of your organization for some reason, it's not really protected. And that's not enough for some high level companies that are like, that's not the kind of protection we're looking for. Protection is a password. Protection is, you can't see this unless you know the password, and the password can be changed. So why don't pens have a password on them? How hard could that possibly be? The answer is, it isn't very hard. It's just, we wanted to make it part of a whole, reworking of access controls on pens. And we're doing that at a time where we are rewriting lots of other stuff too, and making new technology decisions behind the scenes. So that's going to be a part of CodePen 2.0. But as a business, did we make the right bet? Should we have done password protected pens essentially much sooner than we did? Would that have made a bigger impact on the current business? I don't know, because you can't test a guess like that. So we are going to do that. It's interesting. Like, how did we prioritize that? Well, we prioritized it to make it part of a future release rather than an immediate release. I don't know. Yeah.
So yeah, I see. Interesting. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, AI. The elephant in the ear, or I don't know how to say it.
Right. Well,
Uh, I have a conflictual relationship with this technology. On one side, it's absolutely brilliant. It's incredible. It make me sometimes. I think I sometimes I feel that I'm learning how to code again. I have exactly the same level of enthusiasm. On the other side, what's conflictual about it how it was shaped by more or less taking so much data from people without asking or sharing or giving back and training these models. And now the actual models are killing the information sources those models were built upon. I know you also
mm,
mentioned in one tweet, if I remember correctly, some 2 years ago or something like that, that GPT-3 was actually trained a lot with the big corpus of data from CSS-Tricks.
mm,
So is this a strange situation where it's not like it was with Google, because Google, okay, was indexing the information, but was sharing the traffic and the revenue. Therefore, people were incentivized to to produce more information
mm,
and so on.
right.
Now with LLMs, this doesn't happen anymore. How do you see? And again, this is just a speculative thing, so it's a bet.
It
No,
is. It is.
nobody knows what the future holds. But in your opinion, where do you think this will lead to? I mean, this whole
Uh,
situation.
yeah, it's tricky. I think it's essentially proven. I mean, I don't think it needs any more proof. But these big models, like OpenAI, isn't going to. If I asked them, even if I had a lawyer ask OpenAI, "Hey, did you use my work to
Mhm.
train your model?" They don't. I don't think they're compelled to answer. They would not answer you. But obviously they did, right? They read the whole internet. So why wouldn't they have read CSS-Tricks? Why haven't they scraped the entirety of CodePen? Of course they do. Now it is basically provable because you can look at your analytics and they have a bot, that has a special user agent. And you can just watch them, troll your stuff. And they didn't ask. They don't pay you. There's nothing. There's even evidence that if you specifically ask them not to, with a what is it basically a robots.txt, but for AI,
Yes.
or essentially, that they don't necessarily even honor that. They'll just do it anyway. That really bums me out. Like, I think that's rough. And I know through the light journalism work that I do, essentially through my writing and shop talk and things like that, if you have a guest on from one of these shows, be it anybody that makes a big AI model, and you say, listen, I'm happy to talk about AI. I, like you, think it is rather amazing, particularly with coding. Like, I don't use it that's all I know, but I feel like the tools for coders are state of the art when it comes to the AI. It's unbelievable what they're able to do, if you ask me. But if you say, okay, like, why don't you, try to get one to come on your show and say, yeah, I'll be happy to talk about your AI tools. That'd be wonderful. But I want to ask you one hard hitting question. The hard hitting question is, did you use my code, my writing, my website? And in the case of CodePen, the people who make things on CodePen, did you scrape all that stuff when you trained the models that your AI tool uses? Yes or no? Which will be really hard to even get that answer. And then, do you expect me and those people to pay money for your tool, even though you didn't pay us any money when you used our stuff to train? And that answer is yes, of course we do. So you and it's but to call it stealing is both. It can be right on, be like, was that theft? It might be a tall order. Is somebody reading your podcast, or listening to your podcast, or reading your writing? Are they stealing? No, of course not. You want them there. You're asking them to be there. I would love it if you read my reading or listened to my podcast. And now a robot is doing it. Does it immediately transfer from something I want to something I hate? Does it immediately turn into theft? I don't know. I think that's too strong to say that. But at the same time, it feels very weird. It feels weird that nobody asks. And it feels because in the tech Discord, it was like Airbnb. They ignored all the rules and they just did what they wanted to do anyway. And now the world has to deal with it, even though they broke a bunch of laws. Uber famously just flaunted the law. They just did whatever they wanted to do. And now we have Uber because the world had to just change around them because they just did whatever they wanted to do instead. That seems to be what big tech does. They just do whatever the hell they want to do, and then they get away with it because in the end, the products that they make are actually like useful and what people want.
Correct. Yeah, and nobody forgets how. Sorry, and everyone forgets how that thing started.
Right.
Exactly. Um, in this new era of, is not new anymore, but in the era of AI, what skills, both technological or human skills, do you think will still be a good bet in the long run?
Right. Well, yeah, that's the question because I use them. You sounds like you use them. I think you'd be almost silly not to, just because of how good of tools that they are. And even though we're conflicted about that, we have to just be like, all right, well, we're gonna do it. I have found that I wrote about this a little recently. I think everybody kind of understands this, and it's related to. I made the analogy to like reading an article in the newspaper. That's like if you read an article in the newspaper and you don't really know intimately what they're talking about. They're talking about, I don't know, the healthcare business or something. I don't know anything about that, so I read it and be like, okay, that's how it is, and I don't really question it. I just read it and I'm interesting and thumbs up. If I happen to read an article about, I don't know, the hospital that's going in down the street from me or something, maybe I know a little bit about that, and I read the newspaper article and be like, oh, this is all wrong. You didn't talk to the right people. You have this fact wrong, this fact wrong. When you know about what's being written about, you know it intimately, the chances of you reading it and having lots of thoughts about what they got wrong is high. Now, if you convert that to AI and you say, hey, AI, could you, write me an Nginx config for, my web server that does reverse proxy caching. I don't know that much about Nginx config. I'm probably just going to take what it gives me and be like, yeah, that seems right. And be like, hey, good job. Good job. Yeah, it looks good. But if you ask it to, can you, set up a component with design tokens that, uses CSS to do this. I know CSS so well that I'm going to be like, this is shit. This is not, you didn't do a good job. But it's only because I intimately know that I'm able to fix it up. And it's not just my opinion. It probably is not well done. It probably should have been done in a much bigger way. So that is encouraging to me in that I think, even if AI gets better and better and better, of course it will, blah, 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 you still need human beings who really know what they're doing. It's still very important. It's very, very important. And I think businesses know that too. They are not firing their whole developer staff. They're not doing it because they know they need accountable people who know what they're doing. And I think that's gonna hang on. So intimately knowing something, doing the work without AI and really understanding it, it's still valuable. It will continue to be valuable.
You just brought something that popped a question into my mind. Have you used AI for CSS? I haven't, and I'm curious how it goes because first of all, I really like to do manually the CSS part. Feels very like a tailor, very craftsmanship, and I don't want to externalize that. But on the other side, it's also hard to explain. Move that on the right, but if it's on mobile, it has to go like this, but not too much, and so on. Have you tried to use models for writing CSS?
Not nearly as much as other tasks. So when I've used it so far, it's in scaffolding out quick things where I'm not really responsible in the end for the CSS, but I know that it needs some CSS to look right. So you're just doing a quick little template, like bolt .new or whatever that is, that tool does a pretty good job of like scaffolding out new things really quickly, and it has CSS in it, and Claude is getting better. I've seen it get better and better over time at producing good looking stuff from very little prompts. That's kind of encouraging. I know Figma is well vested in this because you can, design your component system, and then you can even connect it to AI tools with their MCP server and stuff. And then theoretically it's doing what you would do because it's repeating it and using components that have already been set up well and things like that. But I find, and this might just be my intimate familiarity with CSS, but I would say that it's particularly bad at it. And I think it's bad because fundamentally the way LLMs work, I think we all understand this at this point, that it's kind of like a next word generator.
Yeah.
Like it writes one word that seems logically correct, and then it writes the next one and the next one and the next one. And the way that you need to think about CSS is not like that. It's part of an unconnected system, and that it has to connect to HTML in unusual places. Like, I don't think an LLM can look at a selector and understand, in the way that LLMs understand things, which things in the HTML that it connects to. Like, it's too abstract. It's like not the way that LLMs work. Is like word, 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 word. CSS and HTML, the way they connect to each other and to JavaScript, is very loosely connected.
Wow.
And I think it struggles with that.
Very, very interesting point. Indeed. Especially now with all the new features that are in CSS, all the ifs and so on, I think this will become even more important. So, wow, wonderful response.
All it can do is, I think that's why things like blog posts are particularly useful for it to digest and think about, because it's explaining how it works. If you say, hey, add a dark mode to this component, there's enough writing about what dark mode is and other examples of things that have dark mode that it can figure out, I need to write app media prefers color mode dark, and then repeat some of the selectors that I see elsewhere. And so it can do it, and it's going to get better at doing it, but it's just looking at how some totally unrelated thing or writing about it suggests that you do it, not how your app works perfectly. And so, yeah, I don't know. Good, it's just guessing.
Yeah, but sounds as a very valid point. Chris, we are recording this before Christmas, so I will end up with a question related to family. I know that you have a small daughter. I also have a small daughter. I often think about what should I teach my daughter when she's older? She's only 2 years old now. When she's older, about how to find a good career, how to build a good career, because I think that's important in order, not essential, but very important in having a good life. And one of the things that I started to do was to ask other parents, hey, have you thought about this question, and what would you say to your kid? How would you teach your daughter, or what would you teach your daughter about in order for her to find a good, satisfying career?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. Yeah, my daughter is 8, and I think I probably thought about it more at 2 than I do at 8.
Okay.
At 8, she's kind of has her own, her own stuff going on, and more of a guide than it felt like a bigger deal, like what I was, because she can barely talk at 2. I mean, a little bit, but not totally online yet. You're doing everything. You're putting things into her hands and that, and like if I play the right music or put the right things in her hands, maybe I'll guide her towards what she likes. I found that to be not true so far. She just does what she can do. I do like to keep her technical literacy up, which is, I have a computer set up for her and she likes that. And then when her mind latches onto something that she wants to do, setting up systems for her that she's allowed to do it. Which is a parenting choice that's different. Certainly she has friends that are just like, how about no screen time ever? screen time is a big deal in young kids' lives, and having none ever is just not my style at all. I'm like, I don't really care that much about screen time. I like the philosophy that different screen time is different, and that her just being alone on the couch with an iPad, just scrolling through crap and just like watching pet videos or whatever, that's bad screen time. Like it's not doing anything for her. But if she's like with her friend and they're playing a game where part of the game is solving math problems to cast a magic spell or something, she was showing me a game last night that she was doing like that the only way they could get more magic in this game was to solve increasingly difficult math problems, and she was doing it socially. That's fine with me. Like I'm not trying to limit your time doing that necessarily. And what's nice about that is you're learning math and you're learning social skills, and you're learning how to use your iPad proficiently because you're trying to understand the system in the game, and you're understanding its menu system and things like that. So I think it's I don't know. I think technical literacy will still matter, but I do find like she won't be really looking for a job for another, approximately 10 years. And 10 years ago, our industry was very different than it is now. And I worry that I can't pick. I can't help you do that. But one thing that encourages me is that thing I mentioned earlier about building a business, and that human needs don't change that much. In 10 years, human needs will not have changed that much. People will still need to eat. People will still need to look at a map. People will still need to talk to their friends. People will still need to laugh. Those things will be the same. And so I think jobs will exist then. And hopefully she'll find a good one,
So I wish the same.
Mm.
Chris, thank you. It was a pleasure, and thank you very much for your time. Before we go, I would like to ask you if you want to send the listeners to any place where they can find you online.
Sure. Yep. I maintain a personal site. So that's chriscoyier.net, where I talk about the other things that I do. I like it when people come to my personal website. So that's the one place that I would send you. I say we are working on CodePen 2.0, and I make my email very easy to find online. So if you can email me for any reason, you'll find it at my website. And if one of the things that you want is to be in the betas for CodePen, please just ask and I'll get you in there. Or if we want to talk to me directly about it, I'd be happy to show you around.
Wonderful. You couldn't see, but I already had the tabs open directly on your website and on CodePen, so it will be also directly included in the YouTube video. Chris,
Great.
thank you. Happy holidays. Enjoy the time with family, and wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Likewise, happy holidays.